This is one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Los Angeles. What used to be called South Central LA is still Gang Central LA. Nearby LAPD officers arrive for roll call. Their job on this Friday night? Fight crime and above all, stay alive.
All right, roll call.
Working here can take a toll on these cops, so they're getting a little relief tonight.
So roll call training tonight, we're going to have Dr. Schneider talk to us about wellness.
In a made-in-LA moment, the officers from the Hardscrabble Southeast Division are asked to meditate.
And I want you just to start to focus on your breath.
So why would one of the biggest police departments in North America do this?
And as you do that, I want you to take inventory of what is going on with you right now. Are you tired? Are you in pain? Are you distracted? Just notice what's
The lesson,
going on.
perhaps, is it's better to meditate than to mourn. Half a continent away, the Ontario Provincial Police Force has been mourning for months.
I would like to begin with an opening statement about the recent deaths of our 3 members to suicide.
Last summer, the OPP lost 3 officers in 3 weeks, all to suicide.
We deal with the best and the worst of humanity, and it can take its toll on the well-being of our members.
The suicides begged the question, is the OPP failing to protect its own? Like all other police departments, the OPP keeps meticulous crime statistics. But there's one stat that haunts the force. In the past 30 years, more OPP officers have died by suicide than in the line of duty. We want to know why. And that led us to the case of Joshua DeBach, the third of 3 to die that tragic month. His story and the questions it raises have never been told publicly until now.
Hi.
I'm Mark.
I'm Lon. Nice to
After
meet you.
weeks of conversations with the Fifth Estate, Josh's wife, Lon DeBach, was ready to talk.
I wanted to get the facts first before I go public.
The more she learns about Josh's death, the more she wants answers.
Do you hold the OPP responsible for your husband's death?
Do I hold the OPP responsible? I want the OPP to be accountable for their part in his death.
Last summer, Josh was promoted from frontline officer to the forensic ID unit. His second day on the job, he was called to 2 separate suicides and an autopsy. Lon says he wasn't properly prepared for the transition. He was stressed and couldn't sleep.
So he wasn't in a position, he felt comfortable of asking for
help. No, because in this culture, you don't ask for help. I think it's uncomfortable for many of them to speak about any concerns they have about mental health because it's just a suck it up culture and continue on.
So Lon took Josh to their family doctor and got sleeping pills prescribed. She then took their daughter to a play date, then came back home to check on him.
When I walked in, I called his name and I didn't hear him. Or I didn't get a response. And I was like, oh, he's probably out in the back working on the garden because he likes to do that and he wears headphones with music. So I didn't see him outside. And then I got worried. And then I went upstairs to open his door and he wasn't there. And so then I thought maybe he went to the basement. So when I went to go into the basement, I saw a light in the garage. And then I wasn't expecting what I saw. I wasn't expecting that.
To work on the front lines as a cop is to live on a razor-thin margin between life and death. There are few jobs more stressful, where what you face every day follows you home every night. Robin Moore was an OPP officer for more than 30 years.
I'd seen a lot of suicides throughout the years. A A lot of death. A kid drowning was terrible. A lady jumping from a bridge onto the highway and get run over by a tractor trailer, where you could actually see her body parts, like her, I'll never forget it, her eyeballs laying there right there on the highway. A car accident where a cyclist went through my cruiser windshield. For months and months and months, I had nightmares about that. I could see his face going through my windshield. I could hear him yelling out for help.
Robin was prepared to deal with the horror, but he wasn't prepared for the trauma inflicted on him by his own colleagues. He says his problem started in 2015 when he turned in his boss for interfering with a criminal investigation.
I was doing the right thing. This was a criminal case that was going on. I knew the interference and the obstruction that was going on, and I had to do something about it. So I wasn't about to compromise myself and my reputation.
But his reputation came under fire after that. He says he was targeted by complaints from his colleagues, 11 in all, some serious, some almost surreal, including one over this selfie he sent to his sister.
Well, she posted it on Facebook, and that was in 2012. And then he put this complaint in over 4 years later in 2016 about me being inappropriate on Facebook.
And you think that this is all part of payback?
For sure, over 4 years.
Moore says he was isolated, harassed. His career was DOA.
How would you describe yourself today, the result of all this, what is left on you?
I thought of ending it all.
What do you mean?
Killing myself. So I picked a spot, and it's kind of sensitive to talk about. I picked a spot out in Atherley. There's a bridge out there. And I had some old weights downstairs, and I was gonna tie them to me to keep me down, and I was gonna jump off the bridge into the water. I was out there with my dog, who probably saved my life because I looked at him and I couldn't do it.
Moore says he was already suffering from job-related PTSD. He took sick leave and survived.
I was afraid of more harassment. It would have continued. And I honestly believe it would have got worse. I think they push people to that point of suicide. I really do.
Gary Pooler was valedictorian of his police training class. His dream, to be a cop.
Why the OPP?
I thought, and I still think, that they're the best police service in Ontario.
He says his enthusiasm worked against him from the get-go.
Well, I was actually told by a lot of the members there when I arrived there to slow down. You're making the rest of us look bad.
By doing what? Arresting too many people?
Basically, it's in my notebook. I actually have advised by Sergeant so-and-so to stop charging so many people. And other sergeants, you're only working like this because you want to get ahead. I know all about you. Like it was an accusation, like you're not supposed to do that.
Pooler says his personnel files had been doctored to make him look bad, so he filed a human rights complaint. It changed everything.
The culture is, and I was told flat out, you are going to ruin your career by doing this. Do not do this.
By complaining to the Human Rights Commission?
Oh, absolutely.
Why would that ruin your career?
Because you're labeled a troublemaker and you're not playing by the club rules.
His complaint was settled, and eventually he was moved to a specialized unit. His new boss asked fellow officers to follow him to try to get dirt on him. He was a marked man.
It's not something I'm making up. or some paranoid thought. It's all documented. It's in files. It's documented that it happened. It's documented that the guys were asked to do surveillance on me.
Because it does sound like a paranoid delusion that everybody's out to get me.
Exactly. But it happened. And this is the Pooler file that I was presented.
He was called into a meeting and shown the file. He says it was pure intimidation. They transferred him out once again.
The whole thing was thin and was never even acted on, but it got the result that they wanted.
Gary went on sick leave. He says he was struggling with job-related PTSD. So take the everyday stress of frontline policing and add workplace bullying, harassment, and intimidation to the mix, and imagine the toll it takes. We wanted to know just how common this is in the OPP. Lara Sigurdsson is a therapist who treats first responders, including many OPP officers.
We're hearing stories from the officers who've shared them with us about bullying and harassment from their colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
What are you hearing?
That's a consistent thing that I hear. A lack of support, and unfortunately, when people do come forward, not only are they not supported, but there are obstacles put in the way. So if somebody actually brings some complaint forward, sometimes they are then targeted.
In her experience, OPP officers who turn to a therapist for help are often exiled by their own.
I have people who are so disenchanted with the organization. I have people who feel like they have no one. They feel like they are abandoned. They have isolated themselves in their home. They have been off for long periods of time and nobody has contacted them. Their sergeant has not reached out to them. Their colleagues have not reached out to them. Nobody has. Crickets for these people.
Londa says beyond a few official phone calls, she's been hearing crickets from the OPP since her husband's death.
Do you feel still like you're still part of the OPP family? Do you believe in that concept?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because I have questions about and concerns about circumstances around my husband's death that I've been asking since September. And I have gotten no answers yet.
She wants to know what happened at work to push Josh to his death so she can answer questions from their 5-year-old daughter, Mylin.
The family pictures.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and here's Josh.
She goes in and out of her understanding that her dad died. And sometimes at night she cries for him. But it's hard to comfort her. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But they had a very close relationship.
I can see that.
And so that makes me even question more. Why would he leave her and me unless he felt there was no other option? I don't ever question the fact that he died because of family relations or issues with that. I 100% believed he died because of his work and because of how he was treated there and neglected. Yeah. Anyways.
Okay.
Coming up, the blistering report that urged the OPP to make suicide prevention a priority, and the man who says it was all but ignored.
How do you explain that?
Lack of leadership. The fish rots from the head down.
They were sons, husbands, and fathers. Detective Inspector Paul Horn, aged 50, Sergeant Sylvain Routier, aged 37, and Constable Josh DeBach, aged 38. 3 suicides in 3 weeks last summer, all from one police force, the OPP.
I need some water.
Londa has been fighting for 6 months since her husband's death to get a meeting with the OPP.
I want to know what they did to help support my husband's mental health and his transition to a job that is high pressure and that required a very specialized skill set that he was not trained for.
Today, she's finally getting that meeting.
I'm worried because I feel that there is a culture of intimidation, and I feel that they will probably try to intimidate me.
Robin Moore says that culture of intimidation kept him from coming forward about his PTSD.
Once again, back to the culture of the OPP, if you show any type of weakness, you're not tough, you're not, they lose respect for you, they'll shove you off into a corner somewhere.
So it's a career killer if you suggest you may be suffering PTSD.
That's a definite way of putting it, a career killer.
Gary Pooler says PTSD helped kill his career. He was diagnosed in 2008. The OPP later moved him to this outpost and assigned him photocopying duties. He remembers seeing an email where his colleagues mocked fellow officers struggling with mental or physical injuries.
Damaged goods was one of the best things they called us. And so that kind of thing. Hockey helmet wearing, droolers.
It's career suicide.
Psychologist Lara Sigurdsson says her patients have told her there's an unwritten rule in the OPP.
If you say the four-letter word, you'll be out of a job.
PTSD?
Yes. That's the four-letter word. You will be out of a job. You will be put into the broken toy club, the rubber gun club. They have all these terms about it so that, when you get back, you'll be organizing paper clips, they say.
What was your reaction this summer when you heard of 3 OPP officers who took their own lives, all in 1 month?
Devastating. Devastating, but not surprised.
Why weren't you surprised?
Because there's nowhere for these folks to go.
But for the officers that you've seen who are dealing with all this, they consider the OPP to be their family.
Yes.
What kind of family turns its back on a family member in crisis and in need?
A broken one.
But it's a lot to manage when you're dealing with the everyday trauma of police work. The OPP recently created a wellness unit with a series of mental health support programs. But with 9,000 people, it's tough to keep track of everyone. Tough, but not impossible, as we're about to see. One of the biggest police forces in North America has made suicide prevention a priority. So we've come to Los Angeles to see what the LAPD is doing to help keep its officers alive.
Tell me, how many officers are there in the LAPD?
There are about 10,000 officers right now.
And how many suicides did you have last year?
0.
Wow.
Yeah.
Denise Jablonski-Kay is second in command at the LAPD's Behavioral Sciences Services Unit, the longest running unit of its kind in North America, 50 years and counting. She's one of 16 psychologists on staff. The OPP, by contrast, has none.
And then lastly, I want you to set an intention for your shift today.
Deploying our psychologists out into the field and assigning them to the divisions was one of the smartest things that we did. Because before that, we were the psychologists here in the office waiting for people to come to our party, and they weren't coming. So we went out and we said, here we are, and you can talk to us.
When you leave here today, how do you want to feel?
Psychologists are sent out to roll calls and ride-alongs with frontline cops to build comfort and trust.
Nobody would have thought I was suicidal. I was a good cop, a cop's cop. I was a team player.
And all LAPD officers are shown this blunt in-house suicide prevention video.
Can you guess which officer I am? 'Cause 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 'cause
You can't tap dance around suicide. I mean, it is what it is. So we do say the word, and we're not ashamed to say the word.
Could the LAPD's strategies have helped save lives at the OPP if the brass had known about them before? Well, they did.
But my investigation shows they are failing, and the results are frankly tragic.
Back in 2012, Ontario's ombudsman issued a scathing report about the OPP and how the force fails to help officers struggling with PTSD.
Mark Kelley, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Andre Marin urged the OPP to learn from the LAPD, but he says his report was largely ignored.
We spoon-fed them everything. We spoon-fed them. I mean, sent a couple of officers to visit LAPD's people and look for yourself and bring the model in. The OPP, basically they gave themselves a slap on the back and said, we're doing so well after I made 34 recommendations based on evidence of how poorly they're handling mental health issues. It's like if they were in La La Land.
One of Marin's key recommendations, the OPP needs a suicide prevention program. Well, that was 7 years ago, and the OPP still doesn't have one. And in that time, the Fifth Estate has learned 12 active and retired OPP officers have died by suicide.
The OPP at the time, and I don't believe it's changed much, we're living in the dark ages. And I'm saying I don't believe they've changed much because officers on a weekly basis contact me.
Londa Bach's meeting with a senior OPP officer lasts 7 hours. Did she learn whether her husband got any mental health support in the days before his suicide? And was he pressured to keep quiet about his mounting job stress at the IDENT unit? Well, she still doesn't know.
He still didn't provide really any answers, and he pretty much brought in examples of his own experience, but he can speak specific to IDENT, the Tillsonburg IDENT unit, and that's what I would like information on, what was done there. And he agreed that it's something that needs to be looked into.
It can be a long and lonely job taking on the OPP. Gary Pooler spent years fighting against harassment in the OPP, filing 6 human rights cases.
1999 settled in my favor. 2000 settled in my favor. 2001 settled. 2003 settled. 2007 breach of this settlement. 2014 and settled. Damages paid. So that's...
They now seem like hollow victories. He's still on sick leave, coping with his PTSD. Robin Moore just retired from the OPP. He marked the occasion by burning his uniform and the painful memories that went with it.
I no longer have any OPP paraphernalia around. It's all gone. It's an organization that I'm not proud of. The harassment, the bullying, the reprisals.
Lon says the OPP failed her and her family. She wonders why the OPP didn't establish a suicide prevention program when they were urged to 7 years ago, just after her husband joined the force.
I think if they didn't establish one, their message that they're sending to their members is that they don't believe it's an important thing to pursue, and that it wasn't necessary. But I feel the underlying implication is that they're sending the message that they don't care enough about their officers to be proactive and set up a suicide prevention program. That's what I think.
So what does the OPP think? Coming up, we put our questions to the acting commissioner of the OPP and the head of its wellness unit.
One of the big issues for Londa Bach was making sure that her husband got adequate mental health support.
I can't speak on an individual file to see where that was.
But 6 months after his suicide, isn't this a critical question to answer?
Absolutely.
All I'm asking is you don't have that answer for me.
No,
you don't know.
I don't.
We've come to the headquarters of the OPP, armed with questions and concerns surrounding the recent suicides. Is the OPP doing enough to protect its own? The force recently established a wellness unit. At its core, 23 peer support officers. There's a new mental health training program with check-ins for officers every 6 months. Should more be done to help prevent more suicides? That's what I put to Acting Commissioner Gary Couture and the head of the Wellness Unit, Robin McKeown.
We have spoken with Joshua DeBach's wife, Lon. Lon was very concerned. She had a lot of questions that she wanted to put to the OPP about the circumstances in the weeks leading up to her husband Joshua's suicide.
I want to know what they did to help support my husband's mental health.
Did he get that support?
I can't speak on an individual file to see where that was. It's so tragic and it's so difficult. And our critical incident stress peer support members are available 24/7 across the province.
But 6 months after his suicide, isn't this a critical question to answer?
Absolutely, and it's part of that review process where they're looking at each of those files. But what all of our members have had...
All I'm asking is you don't have that answer for me.
No,
you don't know.
I don't.
The 3 suicides in 3 weeks last August. Doesn't this highlight some of the problems that now become apparent in your own organization?
Talk about the 3. Every circumstance was individual, was different. Were some work-related, not? I can't even tell you that. It's a moment, it's a circumstance, individual.
But shouldn't you be able to know that you could be able to tell us by doing sort of an autopsy on those suicides to make sure that that's part of prevention?
Which is what we're doing now.
We've spoken with officers who've said that they've had issues here with bullying, with intimidation, with harassment.
Damaged goods was one of the best things they called us. And so that kind of thing. Hockey helmet wearing, droolers.
I think they push people to that point of suicide. I really do.
Is this a problem that is existing within your organization, that you've got to deal with workplace bullying, harassment, intimidation?
I've been a police officer of this organization for 33 years. I'm very confident in that we don't have a culture of bullying, intimidation. I believe we have instances. Do we need to work more to prevent those? Absolutely, and deal with those. But are we overall? I really do not believe so.
In 2012, one of the recommendations that came from the Ombudsman was that the OPP establish a suicide prevention program. It's 2019. Do you have a suicide prevention program?
Yeah, so a suicide prevention program is not a program that we have within. All of our critical incident stress peer support members are trained in suicide prevention. They provide that direct one-on-one support.
So we can do that, Mark, but it requires more than that. That's simply not, one piece is not simply the solution.
I'm not saying it's the solution. I'm saying it's part of it.
I very admittedly tell you that we have had the conversation more in the last 6, 7, 8 years. Should have had it more before.
Fair enough. But do you believe, or do you concede the fact that the trauma that is involved in this job can push your members to the point of suicide?
I'm not a psychiatrist, Mark. I can tell you that the pressures of this job, the stressors, enhance the impacts on people. That's what I believe. Again, I think if you go to the healthcare profession, they will tell you there's no connection. They can't determine the connection.
Between the work and PTSD.
I can only speak as a police officer who's experienced it for 33 years. Is it causing suicide? Is it causing PTSD? That's not something I can tell you. And I agree with you. It is impacting. It can be difficult. But do I believe it creates that extent? No, I don't.
The example of the LAPD. 50-year-old program that they have there dealing with mental health of their officers. They have 16 on-staff, in-house psychologists. That seems to me like a sound idea. Has anyone from your office gone down to the LAPD to see how they do things down there?
Well, we're talking about it now, which is, we've done so much in the last few years. What I'm telling you is that it needs to continue, and there are other things we need to look at. I've heard about the LA structure, and it's wonderful. The challenges that we deal with are somewhat different.
We spoke to one of the psychologists that deals with primarily, first responders and primarily OPP officers. I asked what kind of family would turn their back on a family member in a time of crisis, and she said a broken family. And she believes that you are right now a broken family.
Mark, with utmost respect, I disagree with you. No. Like at any other workplace, there are some that left in an unfortunate circumstance. That's on us. But are we a broken family? Absolutely not. I feel very strongly about that.
We understand this is a sensitive subject. If you or anyone you know needs help, here are some numbers you can call.